Today's session is very special to me. I've spent over a decade in education, and the story that we're about to delve into today is something deeply close to me. It's a nonprofit whose work I've been inspired by and deeply, deeply respect. So it's really fantastic that I can get to be a part of it and remind myself that I'm still an educator in some ways. Moving of Mountains is a vivid account of Agastya International Foundation, a movement that has transformed learning for millions of children through curiosity, creativity, and hands on discovery. This part is important, so please pay attention. At Agastya, students set out on a journey from the spark of curiosity and exploration, to aha, the joy of discovery, and finally, the confidence of applying learning in a caring and useful way. We can all agree that this is probably the most important skill that young people need today. In a sense, I've set up our session today on these three principles, and we'll learn more about it as we get on with our esteemed panel. But just a little bit, Agastya today, founded in 1999, I think, so 25 years, and 75 crores is their annual budget. They've so far impacted 25 million children and 300,000 teachers. So maybe just have a round of applause for this incredible work that they've done. But just to start us off, I want to read a very small passage from the book, which will give you a sense of where this journey began. Summers in the south of India have a way of thinning the will of even the most resolute of individuals. In the state of Andhra Pradesh, where temperatures often exceed 40 degrees Celsius, a typical heat wave can comfortably claim the lives of dozens of people each year. Even the shade barely offers any solace from the dry, sapping heat, which rides its way under one's clothes and settles there like a layer of gross discomfort. Holding nothing but black umbrellas to shield them from the afternoon heat, three men stood atop a small hill. Their last vestiges of energy were draining away under the sun's brutal glare. The ground around them was stony and coarse for as far as they could see, the dead soil hospitable to nothing but the hardest, thorniest shrubs. In the distance was the remnant of an old lake, reduced to little more than a large muddy swamp, breathing its last as it too struggled to survive the summer. The sky was cloudless, no birds sang, and the wind, when it chose to blow, only brought with it another torrent of viscous, hot air that blurred and distorted anything seen from a distance. As uncomfortable as these men were, the heat was far from the largest of their problems. The land may have been rocky and lifeless, but it was all they had. The same government that had once bought into their vision and allotted land to them was now demanding results and pressurizing them to show some visible signs of progress. One of the men looked wistfully at the 172 acres that he had so painstakingly acquired. He mused over his dream of building a world class educational institution, and it pained him to think that after 5 years of toil, the funds he had raised had yielded nothing more than a few sheds. In his mind, he could already see the buildings he had dreamed of and the scores of children that would come each day to be educated and inspired within them. But the reality was far removed from this. He needed more time, and he was searching for a way to somehow protect this land while he hunted for the money required to develop it. He looked across to the two men with him, hoping for some answers. One of the men, Yalapa Reddy, was an ecologist who had been called in to help revive vegetation in that barren land. The other, Dr. Venkat Shamaya, was a practitioner of Ayurveda, the ancient Indian system of natural medicine. Neither man had any experience in construction. We have no money, Ramji Raghavan declared matter of factly, and the government has said that unless we start showing some activity, they will repurpose the land. He pointed to another smaller hill across from where they stood. Is there anything we can do with that hill that will showcase that we are actually making use of this land? For a few minutes, the two men stayed silent. It was an absurd request. What could they possibly do overnight without money or resources? Anything will do, Ramji reiterated. I just need something cheap that will make it look like there's some activity on the campus. Then, through a desperation, no doubt, catalyzed by the searing heat itself, Yellappa spoke. We could make it a Mulikavana, he suggested, looking at Dr. Venkat Shamaya, who smiled and nodded in support. What is that? Ramji asked. We collect large stones, paint them white, and use the stones to make an outline of a man, a woman, and a child across the face of the hill. Then we grow medicinal plants and herbs which pertain to each part of the human body in the corresponding points on the outlines. He stopped and gauged whether he was making sense. Dr. Venkat Shamaya chimed in now. So we could grow haldi at the joints, use it as an anti-inflammatory, and tulsi at the head since it helps soothe migraines and sore throats. It would be an exciting way for children to learn about the benefits of these various plant species. Would it cost a lot to do? Ramji was intrigued. Nothing more than a few cans of white paint and a trip to the nursery. We could hire some men to paint and place the stones and have the whole thing done for a few thousand rupees. It was enough. The Mulikavana, although inexpensive, was eye-catching and did its job of suggesting that the land was in use. It was a low-cost, high-impact solution that delivered exactly what was required, a little more breathing space. In the years that followed, the Agastya International Foundation was able to sell its vision for transformative education, which we have here today. May I please invite our esteemed panelists onto the stage to get on with this session. So warm welcome to all our panelists. Thank you for being here. The way this session will go, we'll have 4 parts to it. And the first 3 parts will be along the aha and haha themes, where the larger question we will delve into is a vision for education in India. What could that look like? And we will use elements from this book or elements from Agastya's journey. My panelists are esteemed educators in their own right, so from their own lived experiences or what they have seen, but it's almost an invitation to them, and it can be as personal as they want it or as systemic as they would want to make it, but an invitation to explore aha and haha moments from their life as pertains to this vision for Indian education that we'd like to put out. I'm going to start with a very short, and I'll preface each part of this with a similar moment I had while reading this book. So I'm just going to start very quickly. It's a half a paragraph, and it's about my aha moment, which was a lot of it resonated with Ramji's journey, where I was in corporate, in finance, and wanting to do something in education. And here it goes. So by 1996, Ramji was enjoying what many might consider a most enviable lifestyle. Having committed himself to finance, he had risen to the top of his field. After working his way up to the vice president of Citibank, he had recently moved to London. Here, as a senior executive living in an upmarket part of London, he had clients from all over the world. A few years prior, he had met his wife, Monica, and the two of them were embracing comforts that wealth invariably provides. The bonus of welcoming their daughter Gina meant that life was good, but Ramji had little cause for concern. Any ambitions of building his school would need to wait. Both prudence and desire coincided at this time to suggest that the best course of action was to continue to build wealth for the family. However, his inclination towards social entrepreneurship, while dormant, was in no way subdued. And frequent conversations with old friends had Ramji starting to question this purpose. In one of their discussions, Gopi reflected on a story that Ramji himself had narrated many years ago. It was about Krishnamurti, the renowned educator, helping a frail old woman to carry a heavy load of firewood to her home near Rishi Valley. Do you know why he did it? Gopi asked. Ramji replied that he could not answer the question as he would be speaking from his mind and not his heart. He did it because he felt her pain, Gopi concluded. And the problem with you, old boy, is that you do not feel the other person's pain. This is a very deep aha moment for me, where it resonated very deeply. So with that, I'll invite our speakers to go into their journeys of with the framing that I've given, and in any order.
Thank you very much, Vikram. This is, first of all, wonderful occasion for all of us to get together to look at Agastya's journey and this book, which either it is written which I must say I got two copies, one the hard copy and one on Kindle, but I have read that a long while ago. So whatever I remember is from that time. But I'd come from a slightly different perspective about what is the purpose or value of education, uh, and what are the consequences of not having that. And that's something which, the latter is something which we see hugely across our system, but also across the world. Education has become substantially utilitarian, and there's a conflation between accuracy and precision. So we tend to become more and more, precise in measurement of what the outcomes are supposed to be, but we are more and more inaccurate about what impact education has. So this is a major problem, and it's a particular problem in India. Those of us who are in institutions of research and who got into research for pretty much the same kinds of reasons, but at a different stage in people's lives, have a problem that we suck into the research ecosystem those who manage to survive the education system, right? And therefore, we don't have that much of a connection with whether education is good or not. There are always, and particularly in a large country like India, sufficient people of quality who will come into the next level. So, our concern is about how our institutions can survive and not about how the ecosystem can survive. And unless that ability to look at the ecosystem goes, we're going to be in serious trouble in today's world. Our top research institutions, and there are reasonably significant number of high quality, have been built on isolation. They're built what I call, they're all a short walk from India. They could be anywhere in the world, some of our best institutions. If the Indian Institute of Science, which by the way has had a great impact on the Indian ecosystem, but even that has got very poor connection with our ecosystem, let alone the other elite institutions. So, what does one do about that, and whether what we do can have impact on scale is the question. You have the other end of the spectrum, organizations like Agastya. There are not too many of those. They're doing brilliantly, and the question is, how can we combine the ability to have a quality education, the aha moment, and not diminish the opportunities which people have in a very messy ecosystem. So that really is the fundamental challenge. And I'll conclude by saying that if these two far apart ecosystems, the research institutions, our top universities, and the school connect up in many ways organically, then this question can be answered because there's a connection both to mind and market and opportunity for young people growing up. That connection is absent, and people are being pushed to work really hard on something which they are sometimes accidentally or deliberately deluded into thinking will be of value, and then they find value in some random way. So we're expending a lot of energy in not necessarily having a little calm introspection and outcome dependent education.
Thank you. I'm going to, with your permission, use your articulation of a short walk from India. That's a really telling idea. Revti, you want to go next?
I'll talk about two aha moments. One is personal, and the other one is very much in Agastya. So, the personal one, and I'll do this very quickly, I was, I think, a casualty of our education system. I was this proverbial good student. I was a science talent scholarship. I said, oh, I'm for science and science is for me. And I went all the way to a PhD. And after that, I realized that this is not what I wanted to do. So my aha, and then I took a lot of detours and all, but many, many years later, because I've spent a lot of time working with girls and women from marginalized communities. So many years later, sitting at night in a women's meeting in Bidar district, this is where I wanted to be. that time when I walked out of Institute of Science, this is where I wanted to be. That's my personal aha moment. In Agastya, I think that very first visit, which Adirat, I was just hanging on to my husband's coat tails or shirt tails, despite Ramji many times saying, Revti, come and do something in Agastya. I wasn't biting. But then I came and I looked around and I said, look, this is this place where my science, my work with communities, and everything else I've been doing in between can actually come together in some kind of meaningful work. And I think that was my aha moment in Agastya.
And it's, I think a credit to the founders, the team that was there, that they could keep not just mobilize the money, but the people that were needed at every stage of Agastya's journey, which is really the holy grail. Adirat, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so as someone that was fortunate enough to be educated well from a very early what about forged ahead? Just say that okay, this is actually not fun for me at all. Someone at his level just throw it all away and come back made me, of course, question whether there was any future for me as well. So coming back to India, I think was a lot to do with the fact that okay, I've seen someone who's succeeded here and it hasn't quite been enough. So that was nice. But with the lucky thing was I was quite young when Agastya was conceptualized, and so I was roped in, kicking and screaming sometimes into workshops and told that you have to come here. And of course, Ramji would lecture me when I didn't show up. Once my driver didn't come and I didn't show up, and that was a earful because apparently there was not a good enough excuse. But I think we did a workshop on paper planes. I was given this book that I think he had bought in the US, and he'd said, just study all the models and build these planes. And my summer vacation went making these planes, basically. And we took it to a private school in Bangalore. I can't remember which one, but something like Aditi, but not quite, where kids were, of course, from a privileged background. And if you've taught 8th grade, 9th grade, you know these kids can be quite vicious. So bringing a paper plane model to them and saying, "Oh, you should be excited," it was brutal. I mean, they were making fun of us. I could tell there was like giggles, and it was a little bit humiliating. And the following week, we took the same models to a government school, and we saw the difference that it just resonated with kids. All the planes were picked up. Kids just didn't want to let them go. They were flinging them across the classroom. There was, I think that was a moment which kind of made me realize, okay, I've been in a bubble, and the education system that I've been very lucky to be a part of, the mean kids education system, is not the norm, definitely. And so if we're doing something that helps these children even understand an iota of what we get, on a silver platter, then that's something worth pursuing. So I think that was important to me.
Professor Suresh, a big theme in this book is answerism, or how do we avoid it, right? And I think you, in a past conversation, indicated that some countries do it very well, where they get away from it, and answerism by extension needs rote learning. So, would you care to comment on any aha moments in that space that
Yeah.
you might have?
Since Vikram, you said that I had to relate to my personal experiences, I'll do that very quickly also, like Revati did. I have a confession to make. I'm the product of rote learning and rote teaching as well. So that is the main point that we need to address. So I studied in very small towns, like many of you would have done. And so when you are in a place like that, my father always used to say that if you come first in this small village or town, it's not enough. I didn't understand what he was saying. So you are the most clever student in the class. That clever was what was used at that time. And I thought I was doing well. One day I had a neighbor who used to study in a bigger town somewhere else. And he had come for the summer to his home. He was several years elder to me. And he gave me a puzzle. He said that, okay, imagine that you have two uh, pieces of metal. One is a magnet, other is just iron. They're identical when you look at them in any which way you like. So can you tell them apart? It occurred to me at that time. That was my moment. That what do I make of it? I was good. I was able to answer everything, answerism, but it didn't strike to me to tell him immediately what it was about. Then I had to think for a few days, and of course, you can ask some people, but they didn't think this question is worthy enough, right? So that's how I think my movement started. But relating to Agastya, Professor V.K. Atre once took me to Agastya campus. By the time I had heard of Agastya, but I didn't really know what they were doing. When I entered the campus, I was thinking, what can be done? So imagining myself as a child, what is that they are doing to a child of that age, primary school? Right? Then when I went there, it occurred to me after the visit that what we need to think about to move away from this rote learning is two things. One is teaching creatively. The other is teaching for creativity in the kids. There are two self-reinforcing things, but also interrelated. And I think I found that Agastya is trying to do both, because they were training teachers to teach with their science models, science kits, and other things, but also for kids where they can be fearless in asking questions and be friendly with the teachers and so forth. I thought that was a great thing. That was my aha moment there at that thing, to see what Agastya or one organization can do for so many kids in the country.
Thank you, Professor Suresh. I'm going to dive into the next section now, which is my aha moment when I was reading the book. And I would invite you all to think of your aha moments as we've spoken about it. He started by asking the class to explain what burns when a candle is lit. It seemed an easy enough question. The answers were split between whether it is the wick or the wax that burns. To everyone's surprise, the teacher was not convinced. He encouraged the teachers to dig deeper, and the ensuing debate animated the class instantly as theories, reasonings, and arguments now flowed freely. The same teachers who often insisted that expensive labs and equipment were crucial to propagate learning were having the time of their lives on a question around a simple candle. The answer, of course, is that the air around the wick is what burns. More specifically, the wax pulled up through the wick as a liquid is vaporized into a gas that ignites to form the flame. The principle of pyrolysis, which addresses states of matter, capillary action, combustion, and energy, was wrapped up in one small experiment requiring no more than a lump of wax, a wick, and something to light it with. As Faraday said, there is no more open door by which you can enter into the study of natural philosophy than by considering the physical phenomena of a candle. If there's one fantastic reason to buy this book, it is these kinds of nuggets that are placed in there. There are lines from wonderful quotes in the book from Buffett, Einstein, Shakespeare. It's really a treat, like really, really nuggets of wisdom which comes very often. But this was one of them. This was an aha moment for me in the book where, one thinks, and it was an idea that I hadn't come across before with this depth, but you think you know how a candle burns, and then you find out how it does burn. But with that, I'll come back to you all, and maybe Revati, you want to go first this time? Like, yeah, an aha moment. Like, yeah, where in your journey in life,
in Agastya. Because there have been so many. So if you read the book, I was part of this team. We did
perhaps you can also bring in some elements of working with students who are girls. Like, there would be elements of that would have happened. How science teaching impacts girls.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, maybe that doesn't quite fit here, but I'll come to it. So the aha moment. So I was part of this team. We developed a new curriculum for the Agastya instructors. And also, how they would structure their sessions, because they were not the regular school sessions where you can just teach out of a textbook and at the end of the term there's an exam. So it had to be something very different. So we were stuck with the fact, and this was an incontrovertible fact, that our partner schools would give us only 2 hours per session. So only 2 hours per session. And this, in fact, in our training of the instructors, that's where Mr. Shah Rukh Khan came in. Because like he says in Chak De, ye 70 minute hai tumhare paas. We used to say, ye 2 ghante hai tumhare paas. What will you do with it? So we are sitting in a class in Noida, and this instructor starts the session. So children have come in, maybe 7th or 8th standard, and they're all looking forward. Oh, the Agastya van has come. Let's do this, let's do that. And then this poor soul, he starts introducing Agastya, and he introduces Agastya, and he introduces Agastya for 40 minutes of the 2 hours. And somebody is sitting in horror at the back saying, what is this? So the next day, we met in Gurgaon in our science center. And you know, memories are made of smells. So I can smell the moist dhari. You know how moist jamkanas smell? So we were on the floor, you know, with those moist jamkanas, and some kind soul brought newspapers for us to sit on. And we're saying, what do we do about this 40 minutes? We can't have them talking for 40 minutes about, with apologies, Ramji, I love to talk about you, but not for 40 minutes out of 2 hours. I know. Just kidding, just kidding. So we said, what do we do now? So we are looking around. And you know, Agastya has these lovely little phrases. So one of them is look to observe. So we looked and then we observed. It was like magic because right in front of us on the wall was David Sousa's learning retention graph, which says if you want to catch the attention of children, the first 10 minutes are critical. So we said those first 10 minutes is all our sweet colleagues get to introduce the subject, introduce Agastya, themselves, their grandfathers, whatever. So this became what we call the start of the session. And then we need a name. We need a name for this. And that comes from Kuppam. And of course, if you all have been to Kuppam, it's really unfair to compare the rest of Agastya to Kuppam. Kuppam is an educator's dream, a child's dream. So there is this beautiful classroom, and my colleague Malika, she's the instructor. Again, some little kids around her. And she takes a beaker. She takes one of those old mobile phones, small one, puts it inside, draws a torn balloon across like a membrane, puts some mustard seeds on top of it. And then she goes somewhere, calls that phone. What happens to the seeds? And the children are super, akka, super. So I said, super is the word we want. You know, you need a vocabulary that children buy into. And in the South, everything is super. Rajnikant is super, Sambar is super, everything is super. It goes in the North also. So we said the start, it's the super start. It is a super class. It is the super finish. It is the super class checklist. So super became that vocabulary, which till today, I don't think anybody's changed it. It runs, it flies with everybody. So when you say a super class, you know what you mean. A super start is 5 to 7 minutes. A super finish is 5 minutes of evaluation at the end. So that's built into, I mean, it's like we took CRISPR and put it into Agastya's DNA.
And what would be the actual superlative you'd use then?
Secret. So that was, I think, my aha moment in Agastya, and there have been so many like that.
Professor Suresh, maybe you can go next about an aha moment that you want to
Yeah, I
talk
think
about.
I'll probably relate to the book itself because there are so many things in the book that move you. And I actually feel that some place you get goosebumps by reading them. This is one anecdote from the book. I think it was Ramji he was in Rajasthan for some event, and he had some time. He was going from the airport to the hotel, and he had some time. He asked the driver, "Can I stop by some school here?" They found some school and went there. Blind call to the school, and he asked the kids, and he told the principal, I do all this. Can you give me some time with the kids? And he goes and asks the kids, "What does science mean to you? And what do you expect the government school, possibly, the kids to say what science meant for them?" And one student gets up, and obviously must be the most clever student, teacher would have pointed out. And this student gets up and says that I see science in this light, I see science in this fan, I see signs in the tree that is outside. I thought it was really phenomenal. Even now, I'm getting my goosebumps to say. And that student's name was Himamshu. I think a program was started with the name Himamshu there. So I feel that, we talk about introducing creativity into education and all that, but then we have to see from the kids' perspective. And that was actually what Agastya did all through. And that was really nice. And even now, whenever I see kids, I try to remember that thing and then ask them something that they would say. And invariably, kids say something that's very profound. They may not know that it's profound, but when you interpret it, it becomes profound. And that was really a moment for me that when we are engaged as a professor, I never worried about education other than giving courses to my graduate students. But after connect with Agastya and reading about it and reading about several other things, I feel that there is a connect we need to make with the kids. And in fact, there's many of you would have seen this Ken Robinson's TED talk, where he says that all children are born artists, and we educate them to come out of creativity. So that is something that we should remember, not to kill that curiosity and creativity in the kids. And I think we engage with the kids, there is a lot that we can do, and that's what I realized when I started thinking about education. Really,
What an excellent story. And like you said, once you internalize that, you see science everywhere. As you were speaking, I'm thinking, what a wonderful device this microphone is. Just and to think so many of these inventions and discoveries are not very old, right? Like they're so recent. Like we really live, if we were to think of it, in the best of times in so many ways. So thank you for that reminder. Adrit, maybe you want to go next?
Yeah, I want to touch on the girl child thing that you said, because let's see if I can frame this without sounding weird. But I was having this discussion on, or reading this article on men in engineering fields, right? Especially in the IT sector, and why it's male dominated. And then it started going into, okay, what's the history behind that? And then it went back to computer games back in the early dawn of when computer games became available. And it said because boys generally love computer games more, they gravitated towards this field, and then that's why the bias has kind of continued over all these years. And I stuck with that for a long time, and I said, okay, this is why there are many. And then I was speaking with a friend of mine, and Govind Naidu, who's a lawyer, and some of you know him, who's infinitely more perceptive human being than I am. And he said, no, you're not going right to the root of it, are you? I said, what do you mean? I said, boys like computer games more, and hence that's where this bias has come in. There's nothing. He said, but which games? I said, well, he said, look at the games. There's Super Mario, there's Donkey Kong, there's Pac-Man, patriarchal games. There's a damsel in distress, and there's a hero trying to save them. Why would young girls gravitate to something like that? So at the root, someone has put something, by design or not, that has forced girls away from it. And Revati, I remember you telling me that even in the classroom, boys are very open to speak. They have a lot of confidence. Girls sit at the back of the classroom and they're generally more quiet. And the instructor said, well, I can ruffle a boy's hair, give him a high five, and show him some encouragement when he's said something or said an answer that is correct, and when he's been clever. With girls, I'm a lot, I can't interact. And so the answer from Agastya was, don't interact at all, right? Don't touch at all. Exactly. Don't physically engage with the child unless their health is in question or something like that. And so it brought me back to this thing of it starts at the very root. If you don't start at that point, encouraging and bringing girls into the fray, then you end up with this systemic bias, which then you think is, explainable very easily by a simple, for simple reasoning, which is actually flawed from the beginning. So I think what Agastya has done is remarkable in the sense of saying that we're going to step into, fourth, fifth, sixth standard kids and make them aware that the girl has to be as vocal as the boy in class. And then you start seeing this bias gradually, obviously it'll take a long time, but getting a little bit eroded in the right places. And I think it's a wonderful thing that they've done to recognize that at that stage and put something into action to address it. Yeah.
Revati, would you want to add something? Please.
So, on the specific question on how we are getting girls in, see, it does happen, and you'll see it in the book, that many of our poster children are girls. There's Maulika, there's Roja, there's Rani, there's this one, Vasanta. Huh? But that's not true for the average. So one of the things that and sometimes the solutions are so simple that they really bring joy. So one of the big changes we made in 2012 was moving from the demo class to groups, to working in groups. So we said that in each group, a child has a number, and number one will always be the girl, right? So if it's in a mixed class, number one will always be the girl. And, until a certain age, the children are quite comfortable. Girls and boys are comfortable sitting together. What happened then, I got a buzz from the team. Ma'am, the boys will protest. They won't like it. I said, let's do it and see. Nothing. The protest never happened. Huh? But the optics is great because in the beginning, the instructor says, okay, for experiment one, all the group number ones come up and take. So the optics of the girls standing up and doing this. The second thing is the group names. Take names of scientists. Women scientists, Marie Curie, Kalpana Chawla. Marie Curie, Kalpana Chawla. So then one year we had an International Women's Day quiz through the organization just on women scientists. So we said the names of at least half the number of groups have to be women scientists. So, these kind of things, you're sort of building into it. They get used to the idea and they don't say things like only girls will sweep. I mean, there are a lot of other stories which at some other point I may tell you. We tried to bring this in. Apart from that was one of the initial things we did, don't touch any child, which stood us in very good stead legally. Because, the whole thing of the law and you can't touch children, etc. So there are many things like this that we put into the system, small things. And when we talk later about changing the education system, I don't think all solutions have to come from the sky. There are plenty of things available in front of us.
No, and it's a great point. There's something powerful about a visual of these girls standing up and going first and doing it. Also, Adira, to your point, I think there's been so much progress made over the years, over the last few decades, to recognize these biases, to call them out. And yet today, I think we stand on the precipice again with AI and these data sets and the biases that creep into these data sets. And it's almost like a reset button in a way, and we have to be extremely wary of it. Professor Vijay for this part, I would like you to put on your hat of the principal scientific advisor and maybe talk about an aha moment that you felt when you were in that role. Just something that came to you, something that came to you from there. Like, oh, this could just get electricity everywhere, like the Swadesh Shah Rukh Khan moment.
Well, I'll be very brief about that because in many ways that's far removed from what we're talking about now. But one of the interesting things about government is how effective it can be in having a negative role in telling you what not to do. Yeah. Now, that also means that it can do good in two ways. One, remove the negative rules and regulations it has put in place, right? So that itself is a great relief. You first create those rules and then you remove them, right? But also similarly, it can work the other way around in allowing new things to come, both as an exemplar and as a rule for the rest of the country. So that happened in many different instances, particularly during the pandemic. And I won't get into that, but let me just give you one quick example. One of the rules when you make vaccines is you cannot bulk store them until you get all the approvals for their rolling out, right? But if you wait for manufacturing till the permissions come, you lose 3 months, to get the bulk together. So a simple rule from the drug controller saying, no, in this pandemic, you can store vaccines even prior to approval. Should the approvals fail or not come, you have to destroy them, right? But if they come, then you can go fast. So those are the kinds of things which dramatically change the nature of manufacturing, of industry, and rolling out. That similarly can happen in education systems also. And one of the kinds of activities which I wasn't involved in, but people were involved in intensely when I was the principal scientific advisor and later on, was the national education policy. Now, that had enormous and continues to have enormous impact at multiple levels. And there, my concern is that it has got a lot of very positive things to be done, but it really is an attempt to try and boil the ocean, right? And unless it has been linked bottom up with other kinds of things, it will not have the proper impact. No matter what the debates are about, should we do this in this state or that state and so on. So, there, coming to Agastya, what impresses me is the following. When you read the book about how Agastya started, or there was an early meeting in which I had the good fortune to be present to see what Agastya was planning to do, it was incredible and mind blowing to see what the goals were. I mean, this was, if you look at it logically, it was a task which was destined to failure. And more than that, it was not a task which one would take up. I mean, what chance do you have to take up and do this big thing at all? But, you know, Ramji and colleagues took it up, and just by taking it up, you alter probabilities. And that's a very important lesson I got, that if you calculate what is possible, you do so by current boundary conditions and the current situation. And therefore, you extrapolate from what you're doing and you say, this will work, this will not work. But the moment you plunge into trying to do the impossible, you change those conditions, and then what was impossible becomes possible. And this was articulated beautifully when Jagdish Chandra Bose started the Bose Institute. He said that many tasks look impossible, but by sheer dint of work, by putting your mind to it, you change those odds dramatically. And that's true of everything. It's true in finance, it's true in business, it's true in education, and so it's also true at the school education level. The problem in school education is that this mindset that by my jumping in, I can change the odds is not necessarily easy for someone to get who has a family challenges of all kinds to overcome. And therefore, people whose families don't have the risk of falling down because of ill health or lack of job or all sorts of other things, they can have this sense of adventure. But those who are burdened by reality have a big challenge. What I like again about Agastya is that it provides an environment where, despite family challenges, people can get together, certainly in the Kuppam campus, and somewhat get out of this trap of family conditions potentially.
I think what you've said is incredibly profound. The first part about the probabilities changing. I think you might have a future as a YouTube motivator. But no, thank you for that. That was a really, really deep insight. I'm going to the last part of our section, which is the ha-ha part, where we use what we've learned and or take a particular insight and derive enjoyment and even maybe some element of use it for enterprise, I suppose. Part of the book that I'm going to read now is towards the end. In 2021, the Agastya team formally registered a new entity, Navam. The new company was initially meant to complement the work of Agastya, but with a deeper focus on locating and supporting exceptionally gifted children across India. Registered in the relatively newly formed state of Telangana, Navam's Progress, which means new or novel, initially stalled for lack of adequate funding. Seeing this as an opportunity to pivot once more, Agastya began mulling over how Navam might better serve the larger cause of education. As a Section 8 company, Navam, unlike Agastya, was allowed to generate revenue. In contrast, all of Agastya's inflows had to come from donations, and there was never any possibility of charging a fee, even for programs where Agastya was offering a service to another party. The proposal to somehow monetize Agastya's vast reservoir of intellectual property had come up nearly a decade previously. At that time, the board had decided against it, choosing instead to focus on the foundation's core offerings and philanthropic ethos. However, With Navam, the possibility arose again. And this time, it finally seemed right. The mandate was simple. Navam would have access to Agastya's models, methods, and knowledge capital, and would use this to build a revenue model and push Agastya's learning into the private education space. This is a great example of how once you've had an insight and you've had that, you can actually use it then for the betterment of the world. Perhaps we combine what we were talking about in the interest of time and opening it up to the audience to really look at this part of our conversation with some of the questions that Agastya deeply tried to answer with keeping our education system in mind. Can you what is creativity? Is it something innate? Can we acquire? Can it be taught? How effective can teacher training programs be? And why teaching has become the profession of last resort in India? How can teacher and student mindsets be evolved? So with that, maybe Adrat, you want to go first on this one?
So, in terms of we're saying about a ha-ha moment,
Yeah.
and I think Agastya is going through that in a very real sense now, as you quite rightly said. The things are in place, the people are in place. There is a culture of self-driven motivation, you could say, from inside the organization. So, whereas earlier I think Ramji would have to, push a lot of these ideas down and get them to work. Now they just kind of find their way through, find a person that's willing to, stand as the flag bearer and then take it forward. So financial literacy, for example, is something that we started recently. And my son had the idea that because he's doing economics, that how come Agastya is not doing financial hygiene and financial literacy? And it just went from a why to an action plan almost instantly, where people came forward saying we want to have a workshop on campus. Someone else stepped forward and said, "Oh, this sounds very exciting. I want to push it to schools." They've built a little financial literacy box, which now we're thinking of putting on for sale actually through Navam. So the ability to, it's almost like the end of the matrix, right? Whether he's figured out all the and now he's just kind of playing with the system because he's actually understood how to work the entire thing. So I think that for me is the haha moment right now. It's a great period of fun where there's enough people, enough belief, enough self motivation from within the organization that a good idea just takes root and just starts finding its way through. And it's a testament to how well they've built that culture, I think.
Popcorn style.
So earlier you asked about the answerism, how other countries have tackled, and I forgot to answer in my excitement and goosebumps. But I will do that before we end. I think in at least in the US, I've seen that they give space both for teachers and students to express themselves creatively. There are a lot of storytelling and then show and tell that starts from kindergarten. We don't give that expression of creativity to children right from the beginning or even when they do PhD, I suppose. So I think I was thinking about this creativity, how to bring into schools at scale, because I guess it's all about doing things at scale. See, in all schools, we have physical education instructor. There's a PE sir or a PE madam. If you were to go to any school and meet all the instructors, teachers at the same time, you can always tell this physical education instructor identify, because they're usually taller, they're well built, and they look fit. Right? I can't point to anybody here in this audience today. So this physical education instructor, we have taken notice of that, saying that is very important to inculcate that. We all drill or whatever, sports and everything. In a similar way, why can't we have a creative education instructor in every school? And they need to be trained, and they, just like physical instructors in schools, will make sure that teachers would be teaching creatively and students would learn creatively. And if you say that we want to find next Ramanujan or next Raman or somebody, because that's the next step for haha moment for Agastya or all of us, to see that who is going to identify them, because we have standardized tests and everybody has to do well in the exams, and schools to show results, but who is going to watch? So I think that we have creative education instruct every school, and they should be trained. I think the model that Agastya has to train teachers could be there. Maybe Nawam can supply them. So I think that's a government policy that can be done, so that everybody thinks about creativity all the time, every school.
What a great idea. What a really, really, I'm I'm almost thinking I should, talk to some people in in my circle to patent it before it happens. But no, it is a really, really creative idea. Professor Vijayaraghavan, maybe you want to go next?
Yeah, I think this challenge of identifying um, gifted, talented, driven people while also providing a strong base is a big challenge. And scale and speed are the enemy of quality. Um, so you can't have quality and go too slow, but you need to scale. How are you going to manage that? So exemplars are useful there to see whether they can scale. One thing we're doing, for example, with in collaboration with the Lodha Foundation at Ashoka University, is to have a program every summer, fully paid. Students from all over the country come. About 300 come. They are there for a month. They get teachers from all over the country. These are 9th, 10th, and 11th class students. They all work together on all the courses, programs, experiments from ecology to astronomy. And then after they go back every month, after that month, they are connected on the web to various programs. They have internships, scholarships for internships, and the Lodha Foundation will support them in college also. Now, this is one example. They will try to scale that, but they're never going to be able to scale at a level where it can have national impact. But it's possible that others in their local context can emulate. It's, for example, a trivial thing to do in the Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad area to get quality people to do this every year gratis and but not compromise on quality and to do it in 5 or 10 locations. Similarly, in the Pune region, the national capital region is slightly more complicated because of a variety of logistical reasons, but it's possible. In Kolkata, it's possible. So, are those things needed? Now, why is this important? Because today we have moved into a world of which has got two kinds of major challenges upon us. As a consequence of extreme climate and weather events, because of human induced changes, people are being randomly hit all over the world by extreme events in a manner which makes their fragility even worse, right? Secondly, the development of big tech in multiple ways as dominating the growth of economies as distinct from manufacturing creates a huge problem for jobs at the bottom end. So you're in a tight trap. Your lives are going to become more and more difficult, and opportunities are going to be fewer. And the simple way to get out of this is to blame others for your problem, right? So nationally and internationally, you're going to see increasingly attitude to say that someone else is the cause of the problems we're having, right? Now, this goes very far away from the ideals of Gandhi, Mandela, and Martin Luther King, and so on and so forth. There isn't such unifying, ideology in the world today which people can grasp. What they can grasp is, my God, how do I manage for myself? So both high tech education in mathematics, in languages also, education, music, culture, and human goodwill for not just for us but for the planet. These become critically important along with wanting to get a job, and scaling that and doing that with quality is a really very big challenge. And I don't think there's a top-down answer for that, but many bottom-up examples can.
No, where Agastya is concerned, I think, yes, I agree with Adirat that we are in a haha space. I mean, something I learned yesterday from one of my colleagues. We started this program for the instructors by having them, as Anand said, if you want the children to be creative and curious, the instructors have to be creative and curious. So they were writing all these session plans and they were developing activities for the children. So over time, there was something like 1,000 session plans on different topics floating around in Agastya. They were in use. That has been repurposed into some 120, is that right, Srishay? 120 30-minute videos, which has gone into the Agastya Virtual School program, which is reaching out to schools that have the smart boards and things like that, and they can And they're not the ones where the normal science center and mobile van will go. So that's a thing of reach. So, to know that something we did all those years ago is being repurposed and used and hasn't gone into some bottomless pit, that's a great feeling. And that I think is happening with a lot of our programs. Even the programs on gender, we have tried to combine what we are doing in the classroom with a much larger thing of doing gender training on POSH, bringing those kind of things. So that's also become taken on a life of its own. So those are all the ha-ha moments. For me, the question is, many of our instructors or igniters, as we call them today, they don't come from privileged backgrounds. They come from average, semi-urban areas, not necessarily English proficient. That's a proficiency. So, but with a little bit of space and a little bit of inputs and having some of the best minds talk to them, they become superb teachers. Hmm? And in this very limited, I have 2 hours only, right? I have 2 hours only. They are able to do that. Why can't we do this with the run of teachers across? It doesn't, it needs will. It doesn't need anything more than that. And that is what is the anti of haha. That's my anti of haha moment. That the things that can be done easily. We go to these government school buildings in the north, huge campuses, huge grounds, some dilapidated buildings. You won't find a single tree there. They can be transformed. I don't know how the Delhi government has changed all this, but there are so many things within reach that are not being done. And they don't need, like huge.
But that, in a sense, is one of the rare criticisms one can have of a non-profit which has done so well,
Yeah.
which is that you take a lens which is largely your own.
Yeah.
When I worked inside the government in Delhi, one of the things we had to do constantly was get non-profits to lose their identity in a sense and work with us on our problems, what the government's problems are. And it's a tricky thing, right? And it's the one criticism one can have, that you celebrate your own success, but what is it doing for the larger ecosystem? I think that's a question that even particularly non-profits which are in the ha-ha state, as we might say, have to ask themselves, because that and I think these things are recursive. Like once you get to this, you get to the next aha stage, and it's not like you climb a mountain, then you see the next mountain, right? And that's, I think, where I would leave the invitation to Agastya and to non-profits of that scale, where the country's problems are bigger, and we need to double down on that.
Yeah, can I just say one thing, Vikram? See, the reason also, having been in program implementation practically all my life, you know that when you reach that haha stage, it has its limitations. But you celebrate it because you need the energy to go on. And you ask the questions. Of course, you ask the questions. I would be the last person to say that Agastya has arrived. Hmm? There are so many more things we can do, so many more things we can do better, so many things we haven't even touched. But like I said, we need that space where we need to re energize. But yes, what are we doing for the larger environment? Are we able to make a dent? At one point, there were donors asking for, has the Agastya programs improved school results? How would they? We are spending hardly what? 2 hours into 8, 20 hours per year with a student. And you're putting the onus on us to make the school results
We
better.
second Ramji to the government. That's what we do.
Thank you. I have one statement and one question. The statement is that there is a qualitative difference between training and educating. The question for all of you is based on on something that was raised at the very outset about the purpose of education. A very distinguished Hasidic philosopher whose name escapes me said the following, that the meaning of education is to live one's life as if it was a work of art. That is my question to all of you. What does it mean to you personally if education is to live one's life as if it were a work of art?
Yeah. My I agree. That is a noble goal, but that requires a certain luxury, right? You walk out of this place and you catch the first person you see and put this up. I mean, they've got in their, you know, top 10 problems or desires, this is about 200th, right? Uh, there are so many other things which you have to deal with in your day. So for that goal, which is a very noble goal, to be addressable, the reality also needs to be addressed for a very large number of people. And see, what we're doing is a huge damage to a resource we have. We have in this country and in many countries in the world a very large number of talented young people. But what we're doing is similar to what oil rich countries do. They have an excess of oil and there's sort of a resource excess problem. And similarly, we have an excess of talented people and we're not dealing with that. And so we are creating a problem. So, this goal to be reached requires a lot of practicalities to be also addressed. Will that come by the economy growing and therefore consequentially people will have time? Will that take too long? Or are there ways to speed this up? I like the Agastya model because in some ways it takes this person with 10 different problems and allows them to pursue the goal which you articulated. So,
Since you said work of art, I remember the first time I went to Agastya, at the end of the day, Ramji asked usually very direct questions. So, what do you think? At the evening when we were sitting after the visit. Then I told him, I don't know if he remembers, that it reminded me, Agastya Kuppam campus reminded me of Shantiniketan. So this morning I was just looking up Shantiniketan Vishwabharati University. I would say that in fact UNESCO website where it says is a heritage site now that it used the word work of art, education, work of art. I think what Tagore's family and Rabindranath Tagore envisioned Shantiniketan for arts. I think in some sense, I think now we are discussing where for science or education. So instead of work of art, I think that's exactly the phrase they used for education as a work of art, Tagore, and I think it resonates with the uniquely Indian institution Shantiniketan, and similar thing, Agastya could also be that.
Let me try and answer that a little more specifically. If I were to look at my life as a work of art, if I were to hypothetically journal my life into a diary every day from the time that I thought of my life as a work of art, and then at some point in my life I lose my memory, and then I pick up my own journal, I should want to read it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'll just give a reference from things I've observed, and I'm sure many have observed. Olympics, the Japanese fans cleaned up a stadium that they weren't even playing, or even the Shinkansen is late. The engine driver goes and apologizes, or they try to protect baggage, unlike usually baggage handle. How can our education system treat values like this? That's basically the question.
Yeah. You want to take it?
I think you're really focusing on the element of caring, right? I mean, how does education lead to caring and empathy? Now, this is a big part of Agastya's work. So we have the 4 C's: curiosity, creativity, confidence, and caring. So this is something we try to do from the level of, I mean, caring for each other, telling children, don't laugh at each other if someone asks a question, which invariably happens in classrooms, to caring for employees, to caring how much resources we use in the labs. I mean, are we going to leave the lab table dirty? So these are all things we try to build into the system. So will it eventually, I mean, I hope some of it filters through, but it is a mantra through the organization and everything we do. So caring is a big part of it.
But I'll come in and I want Professor Vijayaraghavan to maybe chime in on what I say. One of the experiments that we tried in Delhi was this very simple idea called the happiness curriculum, which essentially means that in every day starts with this period where there are 2 critical elements. One is a period of mindfulness where the young person learns to just be more aware of what they're feeling, what they're hearing, their environment. And the second part was a very simple story which would be narrated by the teacher, which doesn't need much storytelling skills, but reflections on that story, which are largely about human conditions in various spaces, are shared by every child in a way that the period doesn't end until, and can go into the next day, it can go into the next day, until every child has shared their reflection on the story. And that process of listening to each other's points of view, I think, creates a structure which then can work. And it's simple enough. And to answer your point, I think, and Professor Vijayaraghavan was making that point about it, that we are living in a world of challenges where we need to rethink what we are educating for now. Like, it's really critical to ask that question. And it's I think the Japanese have figured it out a little earlier, that these are the things that matter. And I think as we figure it out, how do we do it? And then, in my view, unless the public education systems don't bring it in, either through curriculum or through implementation, I don't think we get there as a society. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Very briefly, so I've been interacting by set of circumstances with Japan for many, many years. And so this part, one admires in many ways. But there's also a characteristic in Japan of conformity and a suppression of creativity, at least in science and technology, which they see as a cause for great worry themselves. It wasn't so 3 or 4 decades ago. It's more so now. So one should look at all of this in perspective. But the critical point you're making, which is very important, is we need to pivot from seeing what helps us to and move away also from what helps the organization to what is the correct thing to do. And then if we realize that giving and sharing of knowledge and understanding is more effective than sequestering it, then we are on a roll in terms of what we can accomplish. The challenge which we have today is that all of us are geared towards our goals or the organization's goals, and what happens outside is not of concern. It actually helps us if you are also concerned a little more broadly. How that idea will come in through school education is not easy to see, but schools are very good. I mean, rote learning is not a good thing, but rote practice of certain kinds of things can stay us in good stead for the rest of our lives.
Question for all of you. What have been the metrics or markers of success? And I don't mean assessment of children or external reporting. I meant for you as Agastya to know that what you've imagined, planned, designed for is actually materializing the way you hope.
Yeah, while writing the book, I think one of the things that comes back to you very immediately is the number of anecdotes that come up. And Agastya is very clear from the beginning that this wasn't about finding a number or putting a marker there that would keep, kind of inching up. Even though in many ways we have designed things to at least show us that we're on the right trajectory. But I think the frequency and the heartwarming nature of the anecdotes that have kind of constantly poured out. So whether you're on campus meeting someone in the janitorial staff whose child has gone to college and become a CA, and it's obvious that child would not have had that exposure or that experience or opportunity without the foundation. Or someone, we speak about Himanshu, or there are anecdotes of Monica in the book, and Shravanti, and all the folks girls basically who've pulled out of their circumstance, you could say, purely by design thinking methods that Agastya has given them. I think that gives you a lot of courage to say, okay, this is something that needs to keep going.
Anything from the teacher's perspective that you might want to share? See something happening.
No, I would answer it the other way. If we hadn't done certain things, would we have reached this point? And sometimes, it is disheartening in a large field program. You want certain things to happen and you think it's happening. You go into the field and you find it's not happening. But then you do the reverse question. If I hadn't done this, where would it be? it is in a way a kind of evaluation that yes, there has been forward movement. A left-handed compliment to us is the number of our key staff who get poached and go and prosper elsewhere. And just when we think that our, the catalyzers, they are the senior instructors who are training everybody else, we think, oh, we are all set in this area, it's all there. And we hear he's got a government job, or he's gone here, or he's gone there. We hear from people who go outside and max their session on the POSH Act. And I get a mail saying, ma'am, this is because we attended your training. So these things keep happening, but we can't, like Adirat says, giving numbers is, I would be hesitant. I can get a feel of it. And like I said, the reverse question always helps me. The other thing that helps me, and this is extremely negative, when I discuss it with one of our totally wonderful resource persons, Professor Somashekar, you can listen to the man teaching physics for, it's like eating halwa, the way he explains. And he always says, he's saying, Revti, don't get disheartened. Come and look at the school teachers who come for the trainings to our campus. Our instructors are doing pretty well. So, you have to put all these things. It is a reality check. But you keep going because it's so much fun and so much has happened and there's so much joy. And the people who come up to you and you see these photographs of children when the material is distributed, we've got pictures. They're like, give me, beautiful pictures. It's the instructors who come up with, I found this new experiment on something or the other, or I did this, I did that. So, it's always punctuated by joyous events. So the journey is fantastic.
And I think that's a really, really critical point worth repeating. Very often in most social enterprises, we tend to measure success by what's happening, but we don't ask the question, what if we didn't show up? What would happen if we didn't show up? That counterfactual is never actually examined. And it's worth remembering that. So you're kinder to yourself and to people who are yeah, thank you.
Actually, a very quick response to one of the questions Vikram had, which you had. So I think places like Agastya, they focus on transforming the individual. And through that transformation, possibly the individual can transform society. I'm from KFI as well, the Chennai School of Krishnamurti Foundation. So through his transformation, he's created Agastya, and that is transforming. So I think policy making at a government level is outward in, but places like Agastya or Krishnamurti Foundation focus on inward out. So that's just a quick response to.
As long as it happens.
Dr. Vijayaraghavan, you said something along the lines of scale is the enemy of quality. So I just wanted to understand from all the panelists how Agastya deals with having quality and being able to scale education at the same time.
Yeah, my question was, we work with children in the age group of 3 to 6 years, and we are realizing that all children are innately curious. And, when they go into that whole schooling system where early years they're told, learn like this, do that, somewhere it gets lost. So for trying to understand what is Agastya's view on ensuring that innate curiosity is built right from the start. And the second one was that I was reading that children are the most curious about the natural world. And that is from where they build their curiosity. So how is Agastya looking at the whole innate curiosity of the natural world, something as simple as insects and plants, and then saying, how do we link that to the scientific curiosity of physics, chemistry, or the world? Yeah.
So 2 questions, scale versus quality, and then fostering curiosity.
So the scale thing, for the gentleman who stood up and kindly asked his question, we write about it in the book. So it was an interesting perspective that a mathematician in Stanford, Tadashi, who's very well known for these toys that he makes on mathematics, and he was the one who kind of pointed out that Agastya operates in this very strange space between micro and macro. And I wrote about this in the book, wherein there are a lot of instances, COVID, for example, where you can take a macro view and you think everything is going well. But, and you might say, okay, from 1 million deaths, we're down to, say, 1,000 deaths or 100 deaths. But for those 100 families, it's still a devastating thing. So when you come down to the micro level, you still kind of see that there's pain and there's things not quite going well. So it's easy to take a macro view and say everything's okay, but then how do you also filter down to the bare bones and say that, are things happening right on the ground? And Agastya has done a pretty brilliant job in operating in what we call the mesospace, which is where they have a macro view of things, but they allow at the micro level folks to take on the ground decisions, on the ground changes to the program that aren't deviating too much, but that kind of give it a local flair, you could say. So when we moved from the south, where Karnataka and Andhra were and Tamil Nadu were the key, states of operation, to the north, a lot of liberty was given to the north to say, okay, fine tune this so that kids there are able to understand what we're trying to teach here. Let's not just do a cookie cutter and just say this is going to be implemented across the country. And I think giving that freedom, and of course, the ecosystem also had a lot of fairs where people would come together, congregate, share ideas, then go back. So the entire culture was built around, we're going to share ideas, but then when you go back to your fiefdoms, to use a better term, you actually are in control of that particular area in the way that you best think is going to impact the kids that are there, and their problems and their perspectives are going to be addressed. So it hasn't been easy. I think it's required, it's 25 years of trial and error, and but it has, I would say, to a large extent worked, because wherever Agastya is featured, whichever part of the country, it does see a similar impact without that much dilution of quality.
Let me, firstly, this has been extremely insightful. And from my perspective, I've got a lot of free consultation. Okay? Now, on the macro and micro, as Adirath was saying, Tadashi, the Japanese gentleman who teaches at Stanford, I first met him when he was teaching at Cambridge University. He asked to meet me. So I was kind of surprised. And I said, what can I do for you? And he said, see, Ramji, there's the macro and the micro, as Adirath articulated. What interests me about Agastya is you operate at the meso. So I said, tell me more. And he said, he went through that. And in the old days in India, we talked about appropriate technology, low-cost ways of doing things. So one of the things that Agastya has attempted to do, see, most people would say elementary education for the underserved, the 3 R's, and maybe creative learning for the top-end wealthy schools. What we did was to upend that and say it's possible to bring creative learning to the masses in an affordable way, and that's the meso. Now, in the early days of Agastya, we actually used a metaphor, which we still do, which is, are we interested in filling a glass with holy water? Maybe, a Ramanujan or a Raman. People would say you can't create a Ramanujan, but certainly maybe a Raman type. Or are we interested in raising the level of the ocean by 1 millimeter? And we said, there are many people who are trying to fill the glass with holy water. Let's focus on trying to raise the level of the ocean by 1 millimeter. So holy water versus ocean. A couple of years ago, taking the meso idea further, I told Addy, why don't you write an article on the holy ocean? Okay? Now, which is it even possible to create a holy ocean? Not as Agastya, possibly not even as Prime Minister Modi, because there are lots of things that have to happen. So what is it that's going to give the ocean its holiness? We can all have different views. And we said it's the ah-ha-ha-ha moment. Another way of calling it is the pinprick moment, from a story in the book about the young girl Maunika, whose world transformed after a pinprick. And the teacher told her that what her blood group was, and that was a transformative moment. So I decided to test this, but I'm not saying that's enough, with the person at the top of the Indian heap of science, Professor C.N.R. Rao, some years ago. I was a member of his vision group for Karnataka. And when he speaks, everyone has to keep quiet. And there was a break. So I summoned the courage to ask him a question. I said, Professor Rao, has there been any inciting moment in your life that brought about a change in your thinking? disproportionate impact on your life. And Roddam Narasimha, another great scientist, was in the audience, and CNR Rao said, Roddam, you remember that day they went to school together? Kind of humble school. They were 12 years old, both of them. And C.V. Raman walked in. And he said, C.V. Raman spoke about light and color and so on. For David's benefit, he was, a Nobel laureate, possibly the first one from India. So he's kind of iconic figure in Indian science. And CNR Rao said, I was 12 years old, listening to C.V. Raman. I didn't understand a word of what he said. And then at the end of his talk, Raman said to the principal of the school, hey, if you're interested, bring some kids over to my institute, Bangalore. So a few weeks later, the principal took a bunch of kids. CNR Rao was one of them. And he said, Raman showed us crystals. He was talking about crystallography with a lot of passion. He said, I didn't understand a word of what he said. But then he said, it suddenly struck me, I'd like to be like him. And he said, that's the moment that changed. So, one of our going forward, this idea of a holy ocean, and can we do it through these ha, pinprick moments? And as Revati was saying, it's the 2-hour period. Can you create a disproportionate impact, positive impact, because they can be negative too, and the negative ones tend to be even deeper. Can we do that in that short span of time? And my sense is yes, Vijay spoke about the art of the possible. My sense is yes, we are doing it. Can we do it better? Can we accelerate it? Those are all, obviously the answer is yes. Quickly, the point that David made about living as a work of art, that, reminded me when I was a young banker in Citibank working in Puerto Rico. We had a guy called John Reed who became chairman at the age of 44. And he was from MIT. He wasn't from a traditional banking background, so everyone was very excited. And I read a Citibank news magazine where Reed was interviewed, and they asked him, how do you feel? You're 44. Citibank at that time was, the bank to be in. And he said, I feel like I'm going to be painting on the Sistine Chapel. That's how I feel about my job. And I thought, wow, wouldn't that be a nice place to be in? Look at this guy. He's made it. Now, it's another matter that he created a disaster of a painting. Okay? The city went like this. But I remembered that. And years later, when we started Agastya, my sense was it should be like creating a beautiful painting. Now, how you can do that, different people come in with different views. Maybe they consciously or unconsciously are painting. But I've always felt that at least the Kuppam campus, if we can do it, should be something that evokes that like a beautiful painting might do, or a great painting might do. So that is really important, I think. And to the point about nature, like we have stumbled into many things, not because we proactively intended at the conscious level, but intuitively we set in place a bunch of building blocks without realizing what eventually might be created. But because the building blocks were in place, that possibility began to take shape. So for instance, the point about nature. I got a barren piece of land, not even a blade of grass. And I said, it'll be nice to create an ecological preserve. This was 25 years ago. Because I was a genius? No. I'd seen it done in Rishi Valley. And I just thought it'd be a nice thing to do. I had no scientific basis for it. In fact, at the brainstorming that Vijay was talking about that we had at the NCBS, Ubaid Siddiqui came in with, Vijay brought Ubaid Siddiqui, Professor Siddiqui. And I still remember what he said. He just spent about 3 minutes. I asked him, any advice for us? He said, you're telling me you've got this campus? As the nature and biodiversity begins to grow, get the children to learn from nature. You've achieved more than half the objective you're trying to reach. Have we done that? Perhaps not. But now we are talking about being more proactive about learning from nature, learning in nature, which is having classes in a natural environment. And now we are creating nature-based exhibits. The first one's going to be a 12-foot tall termite hill that we're working with people at the NCBS and other places. And the expertise for all this is very limited. So these are some of the thoughts, in terms of the macro versus the micro, the meso. How do you scale quality? Person I and Anand Suresh greatly admire, Jiddu Krishnamurti. If you had asked him, can you scale quality? He would have said, absolutely not. But then his view of quality was transformation of the consciousness, right? So we are taking a more prosaic, practical sort of perspective and saying at this level, how can we do it through all the great things like people like Revati have done. In fact, I was not even aware of the stories of how this, at the granular level you've done till you spoke today. So it just warms my heart to know that so many great people have come together to make Agastya what it is. By no means a finished product. We should never think of it that way. Never be satisfied. It's a process of discovery and it's an experiment.
Thank you. I'm not sure we're going to top that answer. So we'll pause our session here. I just want to end with one very quick thought. Revati, you had something to say? So there was a question around innate curiosity. How does Agastya foster that? Adirat, maybe you want to get that? I'm sure it's...
Yeah, I think somebody
Yeah,
about...
how does the innate curiosity
Well,
get
as
fostered?
I think Professor Suresh might have said that, we're born, I think, curious. I think a lot of the education system takes it out of us. I think all Agastya is doing is making sure it stays in place for long enough that the child, even after they graduate or pass through 10th and 12th and boards, still have a seed or a spark of that left to say that, yes, that's the right way to approach things. And it's interesting because just very quickly, the age of ChatGPT is on us and AI is here. And most of the people, it's a terrible time to be a know-it-all because suddenly everything is out there. And everybody now is asking the same thing, which is, it's about the question. It's how do you frame the question so that you can pull the answer out? And we've been saying this for 25 years, that it is really not important to know the answer. It's about asking the right question. And that is the skill that I think is now becoming highly valued. And lo and behold, Agastya has been singing that tune for a quarter of a century. So good for us. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to end with a very short passage which resonated deeply with me about Agastya's work and what it might mean, the larger mission might mean for India as a country. So Maharishi Agastya, the sage revered in so many ancient Indian texts, was notable for his contribution to grammar, medicine, science, and the arts. He finds mention in all four Vedas, both the epics of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, as well as the Purana. In mythology, Agastya is said to have come upon the Vindhya mountains during his travels from the north of India to the south. Seeing that the mountain range was growing much too fast, he asked it to lower itself so that he might pass over it. Agastya is then supposed to have requested the Vindhya to stay lowered until his journey back to the north of India. Since he never traveled north again, the mountains stayed lowered. One implication of this action was that humans and animals were always able to move freely between the north and south of India, thereby aiding the unity of the subcontinent. As India makes its claim to find its place amongst the prosperous nations of the world, and ideally with prosperity for all, I think the great tension in our times is going to be faith versus reason. And I think programs like Agastya lower the Vindhyas a little bit so that faith and reason can coexist and almost interact. I want to end on that note. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here.